So I was saying, like, with the parts of a cardiac cycle is systole, and 4 of them are in diastole. This you can take in systole again. What exactly happens? As soon as the mitral valve opens, it gives rise to E wave, then diastasis period, and then it gives a wave, and then we have an atrial kick. So this atrial kick is reflected in the form of A waves. And whenever atrial fibrillation happens, what is lost? We lose.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Please share the screen.
Okay. Is it okay now? Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we are saying, like, this is E wave, this is diastasis, and this is A wave. And in atrial fibrillation, we lose this A wave completely. So we have only E wave to assess our diastolic dysfunction. Is that clear? Let's move on to the next part. So in diastology, the diastasis is first is important is isovolumic relaxation period, then is rapid filling phase, then is diastasis, then the late diastolic filling period. So if you look at this image over here, we'll have something over here before the mitral valve opens is isovolumic contraction time. Not this, sorry, isovolumic relaxation time. Then this is E wave, peak of the E wave, and this time is deceleration time. Then A wave, and then finally closer, and then we have a isovolumic contraction. So in cardiac cycle, we have systole. Before systolic wave, we have isovolumic contraction time, systole, isovolumic relaxation time, E wave, diastasis, A wave, and the most important part is the deceleration time in mitral flow patterns. So let's get back to etiopathogenesis. Look, this is just published in 2018. The mechanism of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, 6 mechanisms they were outlined in this review. There were 3 hemodynamics, 3 cellular metabolics. What were the 3 hemodynamic mechanisms? Was left heart congestion, diastolic dysfunction, left atrial dilatation, and hypertension. Then pulmonary vascular disease, right ventricular dysfunctions, volume overload. These were the 3 hemodynamics. And if you look at these 3 hemodynamics, if I have to transform these hemodynamics as, this is left-sided heart disease, this is right-sided heart disease, and this is volume overloaded conditions. And these volume overload condition, all of us understand, like people, if you have that like anemia, thyroid toxicosis, beriberi, all this kind of a thing. But those have been described subsequently now in hyperdynamic phases. In this volume overload condition, what we talk of is MR, AR, where the valves give rise to volume overloaded conditions. So we have 3 hemodynamic conditions. Then came 3 cellular or metabolic conditions. In cellular and extracellular structural changes, cardiometabolic abnormality, and microvascular inflammations. If you have to talk about all this in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, the people who are diabetic, who are hypertensive, hypothyroidism, sleep apnea syndrome, obesity, all these people, they do not belong to these kind of categories. They belong to cellular and metabolic categories. They do not have a heart failure congestions. This congestion is coming secondary to these cardiometabolic abnormalities. So that's what is a major difference. Look, I've got a heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Certainly, I can look at this heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. But I'm talking of obesity people. How do the diastolic dysfunction happen? They're not happening with these hemodynamic mechanisms. Next question comes, how do you evaluate it? The best answer for evaluation of all these things is echocardiography. Invasively also, you can put in a catheter and look at left ventricular end diastolic pressure, which is more than 16 or whatever, like we do that. Let's spend time, how do we look at these patterns? If you happen to look at this is before 2009. And how do we used to look at these diastolic function abnormalities was 4-chamber view, sample volume at the tip of the mitral valve annulus. Then we drive A wave, we drive E wave, and then we have a deceleration time. So we were concentrating mainly on mitral Doppler flow patterns. So this is a technique. How do we do it? And I'll show you, because I'm thinking of changing my way of presentation is like spend time how to do it. Apical 4-chamber view, pulse wave sample at the tip of the mitral valve. This image should be upside down. Sample volume size should be 1 to 2 millimeter. This is sample volume size 1 to 2 millimeter. Align cursor parallel to the flow. If the blood is going in this direction, my cursor should be in this direction. If it's going straight, it should be straight. If going in this direction, it should be in this direction. Optimize scale and baseline, low filter and gain settings, and optimize A wave durations. Then what we drive E wave, we drive A wave, then we take E and ratio, and the most important time, even though this is not there in a guidelines anymore after 2016, but I always spend time on this EA ratio, this E wave deceleration time. So this is a point to keep it over here. Keep it over here and draw a line up to this for timers. That'll give you a deceleration time of EF slope. And then you have to calculate how much is the duration of A wave. So you have to look at these 5 parameters in mitral flow pattern. Then by keeping a patient into that position and asking him to hold his breath, what will happen? If you can do it by yourself, just hold your breath for a couple of seconds. Once you'll hold your breath for a couple of seconds, over a period of time, you'll start struggling to hold your breath. And that struggling phase leads to a Valsalva. What does it mean by? What exactly does it transforms into? Filling pressures. How do we do Valsalva? We'll take a deep breath and hold our breath, not to bring out his breath at all. Correct? So what exactly we did? We need to take a deep inspiration to increase the blood flow to the heart. And then we stop the blood flow by exerting pressure to reduce the flow of the blood into the right side of the heart system. So it means the preload is reduced to a large extent. But if you do this kind of a Valsalva during echocardiography, what will happen? You will misplace this image of EA to A flow. How it will misplace? Suppose you ask, doing an echocardiography, put a sample volume, ask a patient to take a deep breath, and this image will disappear immediately. So what do? Keep a sample volume and ask the patient to hold his breath. In over a period of few seconds, maybe maximum 1 minute, he automatically goes to Valsalva, and you start finding this pattern changing from this normal pattern gradually to abnormal, and this is known as Valsalva maneuver, and this patient belongs to type 1 or abnormal relaxations. Are we clear? I hope I'm able to this is how it happens. I'm going beyond my teaching schedule today because what I taught you EA ratio, TR jet velocity, E2 prime septal, E2 prime lateral, and LA volumes. That's what the scenario today is. But once we are doing these kind of things in our lab, we are finding many people who do not classify into correct diastolic dysfunctions. And when we started using Valsalva again in these people, we were able to get a very good results. And that's why I am trying to teach you what is why my Valsalva maneuver is. Okay. Second is we have to look at the pulmonic venous flow patterns. How do we look at pulmonic venous flow pattern? We have to get to a 4-chamber view. Look at a scale. This is 40 to 50. We keep it 30 to 40 centimeters per second, Nyquist limit. Sample volume at pulmonic veins. And what we drive a pulmonic venous flow. And all of us must understand the pulmonic venous flow is a continuous process. It has got a S wave. It has got a D wave. So it's a continuous process. S is always taller than D wave. Correct? So keep a sample volume 1 to 2 millimeter in size into the pulmonic vein, not in LA. And then we drive this particular S and D wave. And what does it D wave, S and D wave? This is S, this is D, and then atrial reversal duration. And here is the atrial reversal duration time. This is atrial reversal duration waves. So how do we classify them? That is the most important thing in these patients. And this has been put aptly along with the mitral flow pattern. Systolic, we do not have any E wave. Here is we have a wave. And this A wave corresponds to atrial reversal duration wave. They almost comes at the same time or little later atrial reversal kick once the mitral valve closes. How do you analyze these waves? Again, a pictorial diagram. This is of course a Mayo's Clinic teaching. LA is on this side, R is on this side. So we keep a sample volume directly straight into the line, into the pulmonic veins. One of the pulmonic veins on right side. Color flow imaging visualize pulmonic veins. Small sample volume 1 to 2 millimeter. Align cursor parallel to right upper pulmonic vein. Sample volume size should be 1 to 2 millimeter inside the pulmonic veins. And that's how again we drive the pulmonic venous flow. Now, what are these important things in this particular issues are? Issues are, we look at the S velocity, it should be 40 to 60, D velocity 35 to 40, SD ratio 1.3 to 1.5. Systolic fraction, which is S wave divided by S plus D wave into 100%. So what do? We look at the S wave VTI, we look at S plus D wave VTI, S divided by S plus D into 100, that gives you systolic fraction. AR duration, AR velocity, then mitral A wave duration. Why I'm trying to show all these kind of things is in case in 2020, based on a parameter of 2016, we are not able to classify those patients. We come back to these pulmonic veins and distillation time for their evaluations. Next comes IVRT. What is IVRT is? Closure of aortic valve, opening of mitral valve, that is IVRT. So what do we do in IVRT? I'll come back to this IVRT in a couple of minutes. Next comes color flow propagation velocity. What do we do in color flow propagation velocity is, I'll say M mode across the mitral flow pattern by color flow mapping will give you these kind of waves. This is S wave, this is D, this is E wave, this is A wave. There is the mitral valve open, so this is a color flow propagation pattern. So we measure this color flow propagation pattern from the opening of mitral valve. We go 4 centimeter up along this aliasing line to get you in centimeters per second. Normal is 55. and restrictive filling pattern is 35 centimeters per second. That's 4 at your level apart from EA to A levels. Okay. So if we are talking of a normal circumstances in 2020, what we are looking at is we are talking of EA ratio, tissue Doppler imaging, average E2 prime ratio, LA volume and a TR jet velocities. But in case you can't decide by these, as shown in this one of the pictures, in case you can't decide by these in this picture, what do? You have to go back to your pulmonic venous flow patterns, you have to go back by distillation time, and you have to go to Valsalva maneuver and color flow propagation velocities. So this is how we look at it. And one of the slide which I was trying to show is, me and Samir, we always say these words is, what you all need to know. This is all what we need to know is, because if you have coronary artery disease, always first 5. So majority of 80% of these illnesses are being decided by this basic of diastolic dysfunctions. And next 5, I'm not going to talk at your platform levels. I say if you are not able to decide by this, go back to basic 4. That will help you in deciding that. And what does it mean by go back to basic 4 is, here is a diagram for basic 4 is. This is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 and grade 4. EA ratio more than 2, always grade 2 or grade 3. Valsalva, it reverts to abnormal relaxation, grade 2 or pseudo-normal. No change, grade 3. Distillation time, less than 150, always grade 3. IBRT, less than 50 milliseconds. And then this E to E prime ratio or LA volume, which I taught you over there. Now, what does it mean by normal LA pressures are 8 to 10 millimeters of mercury? As the LA pressure rises, like grade 1 is more than 10, grade 2 is 15 to 20, and more than 20 is grade 3 or grade 4. So once LA pressure rises, what will happen to LA pressure? They'll reflect to RA, RV, and then RA2 and then to IVC. It means to say that higher the LA pressure is, more is the chances of patient developing a congestive cardiac failure. I'll hold on my talk at this moment and ask you one of the questions. Question is, what happens when a patient of very high blood pressure patients come to you casualty with a breathlessness? What is the cause of his breathlessness at that particular time? If you do his echo, his LV function is normal. Anybody can vouch for it?
Maybe diastolic dysfunction, abnormal relaxation.
Not abnormal relaxation. Very high LV.
Chronic hypertension,
Very
Because of
high.
chronic hypertension,
One by one.
LA
Very
pressure
high. LA
is
pressures
raised.
are very
LA pressures
high.
are raised.
Very high.
so because of chronic hypertension, LV pressures over a period of time will be raised because they have to move against a higher pressure, and accordingly, the pressures in LA have to raise because the diastolic filling pressures in the LV have raised. So LA
Correct.
pressures will be high because the hypertension has gone high. So now LA pressure is not able to compensate for the filling. So there's a back pressure, and he goes into LV.
LVF. Correct. Absolutely. What do you difference? How do you differentiate between LVF and RVF?
Sir, in case of patient who has an LVF, there will be evidence of dilated LA in that case. LA side will be, LA volume will be more in that case compared to a pulmonary cause or any other cause of right ventricular side. So the right ventricular changes would be predominant in a right ventricular failure, but if there is a change in the left ventricular side also with evidence of left ventricular hypertrophy, then it is the right ventricular failure because of the left side.
All right. Everybody's clear about all this? I'll modify this statement a little bit. What happens acute LVF is these people, they are building pressure over a period of time. At one time, the pressures goes up so high that LA is not able to compensate for those pressure, and that start reflecting suddenly on the lungs. In case of a chronic pressures, that will also reflect on lungs, plus it will be compensated by RV and RA, giving rise to congestive cardiac failures. Right? I'll give you a different example. A patient on normal ejection fraction develops an acute MI and develops a papillary muscle rupture and presents with acute LVF. In that case, what exactly happened? The patient has been loaded with sudden onset severe mitral regurgitation, acute mitral regurgitations. So the LA is not compliant enough to take care of that MR. So patient goes into LVF. Are we clear now? That is what acute MR you read in your Feigen, this thing, Harrison, versus chronic MRs. And those time when this acute versus chronic MR was there was no concept of LA pressures, left ventricular and diastolic pressures. They were there, but non-invasive evaluation concept was not there. Is that clear? So higher the LA pressure, more the chances of patient getting into LVF or congestive cardiac failure. If they are building slowly, the patient will get to congestive cardiac failure. If they build up suddenly, the patient will get into acute LVF. Right? Now next question comes. If you have understood my talk, a patient who has got a blood pressure of 220, he comes to your clinic, he is breathlessness, his blood pressure is 220 by 120, his heart rate is 120. You look at the pressure, patient is in congestive cardiac failure. What antihypertensive will prescribe to that patient? Anybody?
Diuretics. AC
Why?
diuretics.
Why ACE inhibitor with diuretics? His heart rate is 120.
It will subside gradually as the diuretic will help him in reducing the LA pressure.
So
Okay.
the
And the
tachycardia,
LA size is also reduced gradually and settle the heart rate. And if it doesn't,
afterload.
it will reduce the LA pressures.
so
If I'll
And the size also will reduce.
I'll cut it short to say that look at his LA pressures.
Hmm.
If it's high, ACE inhibitor with diuretics. If it's normal, you can prescribe any one of them.
Hmm.
Is that clear?
yes sir.
I got a patient recently. She was referred from one of the diabetic institute. Her problem was she was diabetic. She had a normal blood pressure, but she had a persistent tachycardia. Can you think of a cause of persistent tachycardia?
So she could have had a diastolic heart function again, diastolic dysfunction again.
Perfect. She was in diastolic heart failure. Her LA pressures were very high, and the people, they were trying to give her beta blocker in the form of Indrol, and the more Indrol she took, the Indrols were shortening her heart rate. The more heart rate will shorten down, it will increase the diastolic period. So more breathless she was more tachycardia, trying to be more symptomatically. She was getting worse as soon as she take a beta blockers. So what we did in that patient, we looked at a complete evaluation by these 4 methods, classified her into grade 2 or grade 3 diastolic dysfunction with raised LA volumes with congestive cardiac failure, and used ACE inhibitor with diuretics. Her tachycardia disappeared over a period of time. Why I'm saying all these examples? These are the true examples which come to your life very regularly, and you don't look at them. You always look at hypertension patients, you look at a diabetic, you look at a sleep apnea syndrome, you look at obesity, you look at aging population, you look at hypothyroidisms. All of these people, they may have a normal LV function, but their LA pressures are very high. And if you look at their LA pressure and treat accordingly, I think you'll find a much, much better results. Any questions before this thing will stop? Then I'll go on a web and I'll try to show you how to do all this diastolic function evaluations. Before I break, if you look at a diastolic function, if it's grade 2, grade 3 means the LA pressures are high, 15 or more or 20 or more, the choice of antihypertensive, the choice of drug in this population would be ACE inhibitor with diuretics. So this is true for even heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Suppose you are a patient of a heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, his tachycardia is not settling down. So what is your first choice of drug? Jack up the ACE inhibitors. Jack up the diuretics till his LA pressures becomes normal. And even then the LA pressures are not becoming normal, then you start increasing the dose of beta blockers. If the beta blocker is reducing his blood pressure, then you hold on that beta blocker at that level, then start using ivabradine. And that's how we often run our clinics of heart failure, where the patients comes with reduced ejection fraction versus preserved ejection fraction and manage their pressures. If there is a symptomatology like, if the patient is a valvular heart disease, patient is a severe MR, severe AR, look, these things are not going to work over there. They are temporary measures. There we need to tackle their valvular reasons. If you have a coronary artery disease with a viable myocardium, these measures are temporary. You have to take care of that coronary artery disease. These measures are useful when you have a cardiomyopathy, not otherwise. So, answer is, you have to have all people where you have to use these parameters for calculations of their LA pressures in all subjects, talking about their LA pressure evaluations. And that's what the answer is. I'll go to a couple of slides in the last. What exactly happening in treatment of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction till 2020? So many trials have been there for CHARM-P, PEP-CHF, iPreserve, TopCat, Paragon-HF, angiotensin, neprilysin. This is one very important trial which is still going on, Paragon-HF trial. What this Paragon-HF trial is trying to use this ARNI in cases of heart failure with reserved ejection fraction. They have proved their worth in heart failure with reduced ejection fractions. But the question is, how do they behave in heart failure with preserved ejection fractions? And this is what this paper in heart failure in 2020 talking of Paragon HF. The results are yet to be, final results are yet to be appeared. We are in a progress. Apart from that, the most important thing, another thing which is available as on today, which started in 2017 onwards, is a device which is known as intra-atrial shunt device. It's like a pressure cooker mechanism. If your LA pressure becomes high, the valves open and releases the pressure to right atrium. This is known as novel device, and some people, they have started using this novel device in preliminary phase. The paper published in 2020, reduced LA pressure heart failure trial, where the number is very small, only 64 patients, 26 center, 11 countries. And they found that this technology has been found to be beneficial for patients with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction over a period of 1 year. And that paper was published in Heart Failure Trials in 2020. So, whatever the scenario is, whatever is achieved over a period of time is, answer is we have to treat the cause of these peoples. Not the question otherwise. The answer is always treat the cause of these people, whether they're hypertensive, whether they're diabetic, or they're obese. Unless until you treat the cause, you're not going to treat the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. If they're ischemic, the things are different. If they're cardiomyopathic, the things are different. But treating the cause of these subjects is the most important thing. As on today, this is what the answer is. Apart from this, we are not only using the diuretics, we are also using the spironolactone as one of the drugs for treating these heart failure patients. I'd like to share this study, which we have been following over a period of time. This is 111 subjects which we studied. Now this number has gone to almost 125 patients. What is this study is? This is the database which is not seen very clearly out here. This is the Indian population data, age and sex distribution. Look, once we look at all these people, this is male, this is female. Look, the majority of incidents what we are looking at these subjects is between 60 to 80 years of age. Most of them are females. On top of that, if you look at this female data again, about their diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. Look, majority of these people, they have obesity as the contributing cause. Next come hypertension, next come diabetes, then come hypertension. No, obesity, hypertension, and then diabetes mellitus. And all this at the 6th decade. On the contrary, the male population is start affecting at the age of 40 years only. So it's not the females which are affecting a later age, but we're finding many males who are obese, hypertension, and diabetic. They're suffering from earlier age also in this population study of 111 subjects. Incidence of risk factor as per their like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, hypothyroidism, snoring. All these 5 factors have been taken into consideration. Total diabetic populations. Look at the total diabetic population, significant. Males, females, males are less, females are more in diabetic population. Total hypertensive population, 56 are hypertensive. Out of that, 22 are male, 34 are females. Obesity, out of 79, 22 are male, 57 are female. Hypothyroidism, almost same thing. And snoring, which is very little population will be studied for snoring because people does not agree that they snore in the night. And on top of that, we could not do a sleep apnea studies in these subjects. But whatever the study which we did on 14 subjects, 3 were male, majority of them female. And again, the age and sex distribution, majority of these people they are females at the 60 to 80, but in males, it starts rising at a much earlier age of 40 plus. Mean to say that very common things in our country, and we need to identify this kind of a population in this particular scenario. COVID-19, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. This is a paper which is published in up-to-date journal talking of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction because of the myocardial injury. But I can tell you that we studied about 10 cases of post-COVID. We did not see any COVID patients. Out of those 10 COVID patients, we could see heart failure with preserved ejection fraction in 2 subjects. We do not know whether it was post-COVID or pre-COVID, but certainly they were found to be heart failure with preserved ejection fraction in definitely proven COVID patients. So I'll stop my presentation over here, take the question answer sessions, and then once the times gets over, obviously I'll